My name is Emily Carter, and for 7 years I believed I had married into a family that accepted me. My husband Daniel and I lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. Our house wasn't huge, but it was warm and comfortable. A small porch with 2 rocking chairs, a maple tree in the front yard that turned bright orange every fall. It was the kind of home people built their lives around, at least. That's what I thought. Daniel worked in logistics for a distribution company, and I worked remotely as a financial analyst. Because I worked from home, I was usually the one managing the house, cooking dinner, and keeping things organized. But there was always one person who treated me like I was temporary. Daniel's mother, Linda. From the day we got married, Linda made it clear she believed her son deserved someone better. "She's too quiet," she would whisper during family dinners, loud enough for me to hear. "She doesn't understand how our family does things." Sometimes she said it directly. "You know, Daniel could have married someone more ambitious." For years I ignored it, because sometimes peace in a marriage requires patience. But things changed the day Daniel started coming home later than usual. At first it was small things: late meetings, client dinners, weekend work trips. Then one night, Daniel forgot to log out of his email on the kitchen laptop. I wasn't snooping, I was just trying to print a document for work. But the message on the screen caught my attention. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Mom said the house will be ready soon." My stomach tightened. I clicked the email. Her name was Natalie, a co-worker from Daniel's office. And judging from the messages, their relationship wasn't new. They had been seeing each other for months. The worst part wasn't the affair. It was what came next. One evening a few weeks later, Daniel sat across from me in the living room with a calm expression that made my chest feel tight. "My mom and I think it's time we talk," he said. That sentence alone told me everything. Daniel explained that he had fallen in love with someone else, that he wanted a fresh start. But the part that made my hands go cold came next. "You should move out," he said. "Our house isn't really yours anyway." For a moment I just stared at him. Then Linda walked into the room from the kitchen. She had clearly been listening the entire time. "I told Daniel it's best if you leave peacefully," she said. "You've been living in our family home long enough." Then she added something that made the situation even clearer. "Natalie will be moving in soon." The room became very quiet. For a few seconds I thought I might cry, but something strange happened. Instead, I felt calm, because there was one thing Daniel and his mother didn't understand about that house. 3 years earlier, when we bought it, Daniel had a problem with his credit score. A failed business investment had damaged his loan eligibility at the time. The bank suggested something simple: the mortgage would go under the stronger financial profile. Mine. The house wasn't in Daniel's name, it was in mine. But Daniel had never paid attention to the paperwork. He just assumed everything belonged to him, and Linda clearly believed the same thing. That night, I didn't argue. I packed a suitcase. Daniel and his mother watched me quietly from the doorway. Linda even smiled slightly as I walked past her. "Good decision," she said. "Starting over will be easier for everyone." I left the house that night and stayed with a friend across town. For 2 weeks, I said nothing. Daniel moved Natalie into the house. Linda visited constantly, posting photos on social media about how happy her son finally looked. But while they were celebrating, I was doing something else. I was meeting with a lawyer. When my attorney reviewed the documents, he looked up at me and smiled. "You're the sole owner of the property," he said. "Legally, they have no right to remove you." Which meant something very simple. Daniel and Natalie weren't living in their new dream home. They were living in mine. 3 weeks later, my lawyer filed the official eviction notice. Daniel called me. Immediately, his voice sounded confused. "What is this?" he demanded. "It's a legal notice," I said calmly. "You and your guests have 30 days to vacate the property." For a few seconds there was silence on the phone. Then he laughed. "You can't evict me from my own house." Simply replied with one sentence. "It's not your house." 2 weeks later, we stood in a courtroom while the judge reviewed the documents. Mortgage, records, property, title, ownership, filings. Every single paper had my name on it. The judge didn't need long to make the decision. Daniel and Natalie were ordered to vacate the property immediately. Linda was furious. She shouted in the hallway that I was destroying the family. But the truth was simpler. I was reclaiming my home by the end of the month. Daniel had moved into a small apartment across town. Natalie left shortly after. Apparently, the excitement of an affair disappears quickly when the house disappears with it. Lindy stopped calling completely. And a few weeks later, something interesting happened. Daniel tried to contact Minye again. Not to apologize, but to ask if we could work something out. I didn't respond, because some lessons don't need words. A few months later, I sat on the porch of that same house, watching the maple trees sway in the wind. The same house I had been told didn't belong to me. The same house they thought they could push me out of. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's just letting people believe their own story until reality catches up. And if there's one thing I learned from everything that happened, it's this. The people who try the hardest to throw you out of your own life are usually the ones standing on ground that was never theirs to begin with. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more powerful stories about betrayal, justice, and unexpected twists, make sure to subscribe and join us for the next one, because sometimes the quietest endings are the most satisfying of all.